In the previous lesson, we created our users, assigned different authorization levels, and used those permissions to control which parts of the SCADA each user could access. In today's lesson, we're going to configure our trend control and connect it to our timer values so that we can monitor how they change over time. A trend control is simply a graph that continuously plots the value of a tag as time passes. Instead of looking at numbers changing one by one, a trend lets you see the entire history of a value on a graph, making it much easier to monitor a process and identify changes. For our project, we'll display the elapsed time of each timer used in our traffic light sequence. Let's get started. Open the Trends page in Graphics Designer. Then double-click the Online Trend Control to open its configuration window. Open the Trends tab. This is where we create the graph lines that will appear during runtime. Each trend line must be connected to a tag. However, if you try to add one of our timer tags now, you'll notice that WinCC only allows you to browse archived tags, and none of our timer tags appear. This is because trend controls do not read live PLC values directly. Instead, they read values that have been stored over time inside a tag archive. Think of a tag archive as a recorder. Instead of only knowing the current value of a tag, it continuously saves that value over time, so WinCC can later draw it as a graph. Since we haven't created an archive yet, let's do that first. Return to the WinCC Explorer homepage and open Tag Logging. Expand Archives, then right-click Process Value Archives and select Add New Process Value Archive. I'll rename mine Traffic Light _ Timers. Inside the Process Tags column, add the elapsed time tags for all 4 timers. These are the values we want WinCC to record continuously during runtime. Now, you might be wondering why we're using the timer's elapsed time instead of its preset time. The preset time, or PT, is simply the value we assign to the timer. In our project, it might be 15 seconds or 10 seconds, depending on the traffic light sequence. That value remains constant unless the operator changes it from the SCADA. If we plotted the preset time on our trend, the graph would simply be a straight horizontal line because the value isn't changing. What we're interested in is the elapsed time. The elapsed time continuously counts upward while the timer is running, then resets back to 0 when the timer finishes and starts again during the next cycle. Since the elapsed time is constantly changing, it produces a meaningful graph that lets us visualize how each timer behaves throughout the traffic light sequence. That's why we'll archive and trend the elapsed time tags instead of the preset time tags. Once the archive has been created, our trend control will now be able to access those tags. If you're enjoying this WinCC Explorer series and finding it useful, consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps support the tutorials, and you'll be notified whenever the next lesson is released. Now let's return to our Trends page. Open the Trend Control configuration again and navigate back to the Trends tab. You'll notice a default trend named Trend 1. Rename it to something more meaningful. I'll rename mine North-South Timer, because it represents the timer controlling the green light for traffic moving in the north-south direction. Now select the corresponding elapsed time tag from the archive. I'll leave the default line color as black and increase the line width to 2 so it's easier to see during runtime. To add another graph, click New. Rename this trend to represent the timer controlling the yellow light. Then link its corresponding elapsed time tag. I'll increase the line width to 2 and change the color to yellow. Repeat the same process for the remaining 2 timers. Create one trend for the east-west timer and another for the second yellow light timer, linking each one to its respective elapsed time tag. You can choose any colors you prefer, but using different colors makes the graphs much easier to distinguish while the system is running. At this point, all 4 timer values are connected to our trend control. Now, let's make a few adjustments to improve its appearance. Open the General tab. Disable Movable, Sizable, and Closable. This prevents users from accidentally changing the layout during runtime. You can also adjust the font if you prefer a different appearance. Next, open the Grid Lines tab. Feel free to enable or disable the different grid options until you find a layout that's easy to read. Finally, open the Value Axis tab. Earlier in the series, we configured timer values of up to 20,000 milliseconds. Since operators may increase those values later, I'll set the maximum Y-axis value to 30,000 milliseconds. This gives the graph enough room to display larger timer values without clipping the trend. The trend control provides many additional customization options, so I encourage you to explore the remaining tabs and experiment with the different settings to create a layout that best suits your application. At this point, our trend control is fully configured and connected to all of our timer values. We've now linked every page of our SCADA to the appropriate tags. The only thing left is to test the complete project. Before we do that, there are a few final runtime settings we need to configure. We'll cover those in the next lesson before carrying out a complete end-to-end test of the entire SCADA system. The next video is already on your screen. I'll see you over there.